Viewer beware.
Hello and welcome back, my fellow photographers, to Viewer Beware. It's the only show where we go over each and every episode of the original Goosebumps TV series, and today we have a very special episode with Say Cheese and Die again.
Haven't you done that intro before?
Yeah, but it's in the spirit of, rehashing something we already did. Say Cheese and Die Again is the sequel to the instant classic Say Cheese and Die, but all the characters have been recast. There's a plot that doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense, but when has a sequel ever let us down before?
Pretty much every time, except for Haunted Mask 2.
That's true, yeah. We have a pretty poor batting average when it comes to these second swings, but I'm proud of them for stepping up to the plate. Are these baseball references working for you?
Does it relate to the episode at all?
Not even a little bit.
Then no.
Yeah, got it. I'll cut it all out in post anyway. So, Say Cheese and Die Again is the story of a young boy trying to prove the existence of evil cameras. Sure, we've seen it before, but have we seen it with excessive fat shaming? We're about to. So, with that, let's say cheese and die one more time. We open to a shot of sleeping Greg that is definitely not played by Ryan Gosling, being visited in the night by a robed figure. The figure pulls out the evil camera and takes his picture, revealing his zombified face.
Say cheese!
No, don't take my picture!
But luckily it was all just a dream as Greg's mom turns on the light and shakes away the nightmare. The next morning at school, Greg's teacher is reading a report that Greg submitted based on his experience with the camera in the last episode. We see that Greg is the only one in the classroom due to Greg submitting the evil camera story as a true event, and his teacher is giving him a big fat F.
All you have to do is prove your story is true.
Prove it? Mm-hmm. But how?
Well, that's very simple. Just bring me this evil camera, prove to me that it exists, and I'll change your grade.
Greg is apparently very desperate for an A in this class, so instead of writing a paper on something more plausible, he decides the best course of action is to break into the crazy guy's hovel again and tamper with his evil camera that he clearly still has PTSD from. But when Greg goes back to the old building, he sees it's been torn down. However, the basement still remained untouched, somehow hidden beneath the gravel. Greg investigates the abandoned basement until eventually coming across the camera, but as soon as he picks it up, a security guard confronts him about breaking and entering, as well as stealing private property.
This is private property. I'm tired of you kids running around down here. Give that to me.
I need it!
Which is strange due to the nature of the basement being completely hidden. But the guard doesn't understand. Greg needs this A in this elementary school English class, so he condemns the guard to a horrible fate by snapping his picture with the evil camera and running away. When Greg gets home, his mom confronts him about being out so late, but Greg lets her know he was just doing some more research for his report. Greg goes back to his room and threatens to take a mirror selfie for reasons unknown to us, but he's stopped by a branch banging on his window. Greg can't trust himself or his family, so he locks the camera in a cupboard for the night. The next day, Greg is heading to school with a camera where he's confronted by his friend Sherry, who scolds him for messing with evil powers for his school grade.
That camera is evil, remember? We had a pact never to touch it again. Take it home now. You can put it back after school. You can't tell me what to do.
In the scuffle to take the camera away, Greg accidentally takes another picture of Sherry, but Greg tells her it's nothing to worry about because the image is just a negative. Sherry immediately grabs the camera and snaps a picture of Greg, and all of a sudden, it is something to worry about. Greg's picture turns out to be him, but fat.
It's not funny. You think this is a big joke? Big? Yes, it is a big joke.
So if the camera is still working with evil intentions, it's going to make Sherry wear blackface, meaning she won't get into college, and Greg is going to get hypertension and probably have a heart attack at a young age. That's some long-term evil we haven't seen out of this camera before. That night, Greg is inspecting himself for weight gain, but hasn't noticed anything yet. However, the next morning comes around and he's suddenly twice his weight. But you'll quickly notice that while Greg's body is different, his face is the same but with some cotton balls shoved in his cheeks. You gotta feel a little bad for the fat kid they made body double for Greg, because his normal life is Greg's worst nightmare. Greg struggles to find clothes that will fit his new fat frame, But luckily, oversized clothes were very in the 90s, so he has something to cover up his fat suit when he goes off to school. Immediately, Greg's teacher doesn't believe him and resorts to pulling his clothes off, which is something you definitely are not allowed to do. Greg says the camera did it, but the teacher still doesn't believe him, despite Greg's tremendous overnight weight gain.
It takes a lot of concentration to do well on the balance beam.
That night, Sherry shows up to Greg's house looking like a zombie. Apparently, the negative image was meant to show that she would be losing weight, which doesn't really make a lot of sense as the camera would have just showed her very skinny, the same way it showed Greg as very fat. But anyway, the kids are in a lot of trouble as even while they're talking, Sherry loses weight and Greg blimps up larger. The kids decide more pictures will help, so Sherry takes Greg's pic again, but he just shows up even fatter. A real fuck you move by the camera. Greg decides the secret of the curse is in the developed photos, so they go to a 24-hour photo development store, something that hasn't existed in about 25 years, to get the photos altered to look more like the kid's original image. Sherry walks in looking like a cokehead, while Greg looks like Marlon Brando in The Island of Dr. Moreau. But inverting the Polaroids will surely help.
Well, what is this, some kind of joke?
It's not a joke. You have to help us.
The kids sit on the floor of the store, simultaneously expanding and contracting, while Terry the photo boy gets to work in the darkroom. And then that's it. That's all they do. The evil camera is easily defeated with Photoshop. Greg is presenting his findings in class, but the teacher still doesn't believe him because he still has no proof.
There is, however, one way to prove that your story is true.
How?
Take a picture with this evil camera.
No! Please don't!
Oh, look at this. That's quite amusing. You've got an instant camera in there, and here's a trick photograph. You went to a lot of trouble, though.
It's not a trick.
Of course it's a trick. What are you talking about?
Look, he's losing his hair! You've got your proof.
What's happening here? What's happening? What's happening? It's not a trick!
So Greg proved the camera worked. Technically, he proved it a few times. But I don't think his teacher's going to give him a passing grade for making him go bald. All things considered, the camera felt a lot more lenient in this episode than the previous one. All it really did was give two kids an eating disorder, made a guy fall down, and then gave another guy a buzz cut. And I mean, when you compare that to disappearing off the face of the earth or getting into a nasty car crash, it could be a lot worse. And if I'm remembering right, Spidey dedicated his whole life to protecting this camera, and he ended up getting it back in the end of the last episode. But then he just kind of abandons it there.
Makes no damn sense.
Exactly. And a lot of things in this episode don't really make sense. And that's because we learned from director Ron Oliver, nobody really wanted to make this episode. It was season 3 of Goosebumps and the ratings were going down, so Fox pushed the team to adapt a sequel to a highly rated episode, which was Say Cheese and Die. But Ron Oliver says that no matter how they recut it and re-edited it, nothing really worked for them. While the main plot of the book and the episode are the same, with Greg trying to pass his report, a lot of things around it are very different. In the book, the house that Greg found the camera in was bought by a new owner, and then when Greg went to poke around the remains to find the camera, the owner's son found him. Then that's who he took a picture with of the camera to run away. And in the episode, it's just a random unnamed man that walks into a bunker for no reason. The book also takes the weight changes of Greg and Sherry much more slowly, taking place over the span of a week. It's the bulk of the book. There's scenes of them getting bullied and stuff by their teachers and other students, and that's more of where the story lies, but they didn't really adapt that into the episode. The main plot is still resolved in the same way with developing negatives of the photos, but then Greg proves the camera works by giving it to the teacher, and the teacher takes a picture of the class, and it's just kind of ambiguous with what happens to them. But that's it. That's the story.
Sounds like a boring book.
Yeah, it's not exactly the best candidate to make an adaptation from. Two kids gradually changing weight over the course of a week, while I guess that could be scary, and it is a real world problem with eating disorders. It's not like riveting television compared to the other horror stories we've seen so far, but there was a lot of pressure from Fox to make, a highly rated episode. They wanted this series to keep going, and they weren't pulling in the viewers like they used to. So hands were tied. The book was there, the sequel was there. They couldn't execute it because the sequel wasn't very good. And I think the problem lies in the main plot just not being super interesting. They tried to mix in some other stuff, like the scene with the Grim Reaper at the start, and do something to make this, feel more urgent. Like the weight change happens instantly. They're about to explode. They're trying to add this ticking clock to this story that wasn't built with that. Honestly, they probably would have done better to give it the more Monster Blood treatment, where they just went entirely off script and made their own thing, because the book was just a stinker. So for all of these reasons, I'm gonna have to give Say Cheese and Die again 2 bumps out of 5. Check it out. If you have problems with regulating your weight or losing your hair, you might have a twinge of pain watching these photos, but, it's a life lesson to not steal someone's property for the purposes of getting an A on your 5th grade book report. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one, and also if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I would appreciate it. We're almost at 1,000. Let's get there. See you guys next time.
The camera must be broken.
Are you nuts? Well, if it's broken, you wouldn't mind me taking your picture.
It's not funny.